Yes, well, the meeting point is polarity. We've crossed paths on Facebook, and I teach polarity within the context of relationships between men and women. And I really emphasize dominance and radiance. And dominance is when men are really profoundly in the leadership role in the relationship, and that leadership is about service to her heart. And when her heart is being served in that way, there is a feminine radiance that happens. And that's her gift to him and to the world. However, where it gets a little controversial is that if you have a leader, you have to have a follower. You can't have two leaders. And so, there's a lot of conditioning that I work with in men and in women to help men claim their leadership so that they can claim their women, but also help women follow the lead of their men so their hearts can open up and be feminine and radiant.
Mhm. Yeah, so when we were speaking a little bit before about my French background, I moved to France when I was 18, and my
Mhm.
dream was to dance because
Oh, good.
I was brought up in Sweden in a very logical, very secular, society. And I before I went to college, I wanted to dance. So I went to Paris, and it was really that world that opened up, and I was always just interested in dance with a partner. I never
Oh,
show
yes.
dance, and these things were never really interesting to me. And there was something in that let go for me after being an A student, the best person in my class, to just leave to culture that is like romantic, like it is in Paris, and to just be able to lean in and follow. And I mean, this is all, I mean, we're going to come to something later about how I'm not a follower, but I feel like in the dance of leaving out a part of me, I'm half Swedish, half Spanish, that I hadn't been able to live out in the Swedish culture. Like I really needed to swing the pendulum very much to this side.
All
And
right.
and I believe that when people get triggered about the leading and the following, for me somehow, because I was 18 at the time, it was, I kind of just think about it as a dance, and it wouldn't work if both are trying to lead or both are trying to follow.
Exactly. So,
So,
I was an Argentine tango dancer for 3 years, and I still know how to dance. It's like riding a bike. Once you learn, you don't forget. And I went to Argentina a couple times, and I became intermediate, advanced intermediate, not totally advanced. And you cannot have an Argentine tango with two leaders. And typically, it's the man who leads and the woman who follows. But once you do that dance and you become proficient as a leader and proficient as a follower, you create what's called tango bliss. Okay. And that's when the woman, well, that's when the man is so fully in his lead. He's got his competency because he understands how to dance technically, but he also understands how to lead the woman. And that gets extremely subtle and exquisite to the point where it's almost telepathic.
mhm.
You're just reading each other's energy instantaneously. And women flock to that dance. And it's because they get to surrender and follow and even submit to the leadership of the man, and they get their energetic orgasm. It's an energetic orgasm. And it happens because the roles are very clear, right? And one of the problems in relationships today is that the roles aren't clear.
Mhm.
So it's the man gets really feminized and the woman gets very masculinized, and it's upside down, backwards, and inside out. And then the relationship becomes dysfunctional. It's like a bad tango dance. But if you get the roles really good, really nailed, then you're going to have a woman who can just feel the dominance of her man. And guess what that does? It penetrates her energetically, just as that happens in the Argentine tango, and just as that happens in the bedroom, where the man is erotically penetrating her as well as energetically penetrating her.
Mhm. So I know that we have in society, we have some beliefs that dominance and patriarchy, and that is bad and that we should be equal. And I remember reading one of David Data's books where he's speaking about three frequencies, we could say. So it can be that very unconscious where it's dominance but very unconscious, and then he speaks about
Right.
a higher frequency, and then he speaks about intimate communion. So do you see
Right.
that kind of frequency band of possibilities of awareness
Yeah.
coming out that dance?
Yeah, those 3 stages that data talks about. And the way I frame it is that, there's that asshole dominance. He's an egocentric prick. He's a jerk. And we don't want that guy. And he's not really leading anything because he's too self-absorbed. He's too narcissistic. He's quasi-sociopathic. Don't want any of that. That's a dysfunctional relationship, and a woman should never submit to that leadership because it's abuse. The dominance that I'm talking about is where a man transcends his emasculation. He's no longer hyper feminized and always in his feelings, but he's reclaimed his power. And so his power is online, his instinct is online, his cock is online, and it's being guided by his heart, which is online. So, and then we ideally have some good mental operating systems up here running the show. So a bad mental operating system is, for example, masculinity is toxic. That is a horrible mental operating system. But if men have that uploaded in their minds, it's going to screw up how they show up in the world and with their women. So we got to have good mental operating programs up here, which is what I teach. And then ideally, he has a spiritual or a soulful realization as well. So you can see I've kind of casually paraphrased the chakra system there. All of the chakras are just lit and online. That's an evolved man. And it's not this evolved masculine that you're seeing now, where men will feminize the masculine and say that becoming masculine is like becoming more of a woman. No, that's wrong. You just don't. If you become like more, if a man becomes more like a woman, he's going to fuck up his polarity with women in relationships. And it would be like in the tango, the leader becoming more like a follower. And then you just have 2 followers. And you're like, that can't work.
So if we go back to the chakra system, and because it sounds really good, somebody who's driven from the heart, who is like to have everything online, who has that penetrating, power in the world. But I also know that sounds almost a little bit good to be true if we look around in the world. So where turning on those energy centers, like, do you start from the bottom or do you start from the top? Like how to embody that, because it seems very, very advanced for many people.
Yeah, it is. You're absolutely right. It is advanced. I mean, and that's because it's our cutting edge. It's our frontier. The best thing to start off with is to have a good map of what is possible. So if you don't even know California exists, you can't even get there. But then you need a map to tell you how to get to California. And then you need a map to tell you, or a plan to tell you what you need to use to prepare to get to California. So let's say it's a map/plan. And then you're like, oh, there are all these things to activate. Like I've got this great plan. It's a map that shows me what I can do. If I sit down and meditate, this is great. I can wake up to source and my identity is source. That's great. But I don't stop there. That's like getting halfway across the United States. And you're still going to California from the East Coast. So then you actually have to have that realization descend, so that you become, let's say, more heart-centered, and then more power-centered, and then more cock-centered and instinct-centered. You're like, wow, that's a lot of work. Yeah, it is. It is work. And that's why, but if people understand this earlier in life, they can do it earlier in life. Mm-hmm. I'm almost 47. It's taken me a long fucking time to get to this. But if I had a great map when I was 15, instead of learning about it when I was 28 or 27, it would be totally different. 25, something like that.
So in space, you kind of see, I mean, it feels like the map is something that we can see and think about. So it almost feels like it's a spiral that is coming down and it's activating on its way down. Would you say that that's how the map and the movement and the turning on happens?
That's a great question. For me, I translate that question into like Kundalini and how that works. So there is, some perspectives are saying that the Kundalini life force is activated in the root chakra and ascends through the Sushumna and culminates in the crown and boom, you know. And there are other perspectives that are like, no, it's actually coming down. So when I meditate, for me, it is like it comes through the crown chakra. And I don't per se feel it coming up when I meditate. Other times I do feel it coming up the spine. So there may just be a cosmic orbit there going on. But to get to your question, I mean, I think, to put it clearly or simply, we have to look at those areas in our psyche or in our body mind that have that are caught, they're tangled knots, right? There's a Sanskrit word called the ahamkara, which is a knot, right? Where are the knots inside of us? So if you talk to an emasculated spiritual male, he's really great here in the heart, but he's got some knots below the heart. Some people might call this like an aspect of shadow, a dimension of shadow. They're contractions. So the more we wake up to our identity as source through our natural evolution or through meditation or whatever, the more we can start to see these different knots or feel them, Knots. And then if you bring awareness to that, or you work with a teacher, then you can untie or untangle those knots. So for many men, one of their major knots is going to be with their power, right? They have issues with their power. I'm talking about conscious males, emasculated spiritual males. And because of that, they can't have effective polarity. They just can't do it because they're too heart-centered. And then the woman is with a man who's too heart-centered. She can't trust his lead, can't trust his power because he's too sensitive, who's too feeling-oriented. He's great as someone to talk to and share feelings with, but after a while, there isn't that trust. You don't feel his power, his dominance, his leadership. You're not turned on. You're not polarized.
Yeah, for me, I do see, I mean, I also see the spiral dynamics of things where things start on the bottom and then they move up, and every time it moves with more awareness. And I feel as well.
Like that.
No, go.
No, I was just saying I like it. Go ahead.
So it's I see, when you speak, I see it's a continual process of involution, evolution. Like, it's not that everything just moves one direction or the other. And I can feel as well, if I think about meditation as a woman, when I meditate, that what I feel is that the energy comes up, like through my genitals, through the front of my body, through my heart, through my breasts, it comes up. But then with consciousness, I can I can also turn it back down, and it is like a microcosmic orbit in all of us. And I guess what I'm saying as well, when I think about the spiral the other way, is that if there are knots, the way that you're saying, if there are knots in your lower chakras where there is not like a conscious awareness, that is going to clog your possibility to live out anything. I mean, even your leadership, if we speak about also manifestation and that penetrative power, it's going to be lived out, like you say, kind of more like an asshole energy, to use your words, than something empowering in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so men need to have an understanding. They need to have a cool map or plan. And I think sounds like you're familiar with the integral theory by using spiral dynamics, involution, evolution. That's great. I didn't know that we had that common background. I worked with Ken Wilber in his institute for a few years, and I was pretty close to him, actually. And we were starting on combining integral theory with Argentine tango, as a matter of fact.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty cool. Yeah, we called it 3-body tango, and I taught it. So it was tango in the gross body, tango in the subtle body, and tango in the causal body. And so that meant that, when you had that alignment between those 3 bodies in 2 people, then you could have a greater and greater degree of bliss as well, which would then be kind of translated as an awakening experience, because when you have that tango bliss and you're like, whoa. And if it's really profound, it would be like Satchitananda, which is being consciousness bliss. And you'll be having it right there on the dance floor. And that is an example of waking up to that formless bliss body that we all have access to.
That's what I did when I was 18. I knew it, not from this lifetime. But like, the intuition brought me to go seek for it because it was already there. So I do. It's funny that you say integral theory and dance, because that's the 3D, like that's the thing as well. I mean, there's so many things here that I feel, but it's only by including the physical body, like any other bliss.
Right.
It's like it's worthless in this realm anyway.
Yeah, when I first woke up around 27, I spent a few years just doing a lot of meditation. And it was that formless bliss. And it was just happening naturally. I didn't even have to try. It was just naturally online. But the involution that we talk about is incarnating our awakening further and further down into the body, so to speak, so that none of the chakras are left out. The third, second, and first are not left out. For a lot of people, men and women, the awakening, if they have an awakening, it kind of stops this descent at the heart. And so they're really great with the heart. And I was there for a while too, but the current didn't stop. It was just like I kept on seeing feeling the knots in myself and seeing the problems outside in culture. And it was really a matter of getting my heart broken multiple times. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm the most loving motherfucker. I'm so kind and compassionate, and I'm listening to her, and I'm sharing my feelings, and I'm just holding the space and all that good nonsense, which is not total nonsense. It's good up to a point. So why all these heartbreaks? I thought I was doing it right, checking the boxes. And it really had to do with I wasn't in my power, and I didn't have that penetrative energy because I thought that power was a problem in men. And that's an error of perception, to say that power is a problem in men. When men internalize that viewpoint, they fuck themselves royally. And they fuck women, but not in the good sense. They fuck them over. And it's because they can't show up with power and leadership and dominance in relationship. I don't know if you're going to agree with me on this, but I'm just going to tell you anyways. For me, power is a masculine term. And it's not to say that women can't be in power, but they will masculinize themselves in that process. And so that's their choice. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but there are vestigial effects on the body mind if they spend a lot of time in power. Whereas with men, if they get in their power, they rock it out because it is a masculine thing. However, if they're egocentric, then that becomes abuse. If they're letting their power be guided by their heart, then they rock it out. And these are the kind of men that we want. We want our men to be very powerful. We don't want them to be afraid of their power, because their power is what they used to serve. They serve their women, their family, their community, and the world. But we got to make sure that it's guided by the heart.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that the people that can benefit most from Binet benefit?
That was good. I'm about to use that.
Would you say that it's more the heart-centered, more maybe Western man that is kind of, wake? Would you say that that's where you can help insert or come back to power, as opposed to, for example, for me, polarity has always been, for me, it's just one of the forces of, like, it's what the universe works. There's a polarity, and then what I call it's an equator in the middle, which is the heart, but the poles are there, and then there's the equator. So I have always attracted, because I'm half Spanish, more the Latin, and I've paid that price for a little bit unawareness, because at least I felt that there was an equator in the middle and that we were dancing, So would you say that what you work with, would also help gain more awareness and more like less kind of me energy and more we and or how who is the perfect person to come and take part of what you are teaching?
That's a great question. Men have all sorts of places that they can work on to become more evolved. So there are men who are more masculine in their energy signature, but you can tell they're not very evolved. But you like the fact that they're masculine. You're like, God, that's awesome. But you probably couldn't date it because there's not enough consciousness there. But you like the masculine energy that you're getting, right? And so it's like, maybe I'll have a one night stand with this guy. I can't, he's not relationship material. So it's because you want that masculine energy. So I would work with that guy to get him more into his heart and get his mind more online with great operating systems. So that, but I would make sure that he doesn't compromise his masculinity. And then there are men these are the men that I usually work with right here, who are very heart-centric and smart, but they don't know how to be very masculine. And so they're not in touch with their power. They're not in touch with their instinct. They're not in touch with their cock, and it's like these guys need to become more masculine. So what I do with them is I say, oh, you've got this great sensitivity, but it's moving in the direction of the feminine. And so your sensitivity is feminizing you. Mm-hmm. What we need to do is take that great exquisite sensitivity and masculinize you. So we do actually, I say this, that there's really one need in the relationship that has to be taken care of before all other needs. And it's the man's need to lead. The reason why it's the most important is that when the man knows his need to lead and steps into that, then all the other needs can be taken care of in a harmonious, symmetrical, beneficial way so that the man and the woman thrive. If the man doesn't understand his need to lead and be dominant in that great way, not the jerk, the great way, then he can't lead the relationship at all. And therefore he can't take care of her needs or his needs because he's caught up in these mental programs that say, oh, if I lead, then that must mean that she's inferior. No, it doesn't mean that she's inferior. When a man leads, that's his gift. That doesn't mean that she's inferior. In Tango, the leader is not superior to the follower. It's just the gift that he brings. And the gift that she brings is her radiance. Her radiance is infinitely greater than his radiance if he's masculine, but that doesn't make her superior or unequal to him, right? It's just different gifts. What's happened is because of the way we're miseducated and indoctrinated, we think in terms of this inequality so that if he's leading, she must be inferior or unequal. That's not true. Mm-hmm. But men will internalize that, and women, and think, oh, I don't want to lead or be led because that means I'm inferior. No. When the father leads that family, he's not superior to his wife. He's not superior to his children. He's just using the gift that he's designed to have and using it to serve the people that he loves. But if you have a warped, angry feminist perspective, for example, then you can be like, no, that's the patriarchy, blah, blah, blah. No, he's using his leadership to serve. Mm-hmm. Devotion. He's devoted to his wife. He's devoted to his kids. And he's a leader. And every man can be a leader because every man can be a father, right? Every man can lead.
Mm-hmm. So back to what we said before, would you work with these two types separately? Because they're different things that need to come online. If you have like more of the unaware person that needs to come more into the heart and the awareness and using the operative system, would that be a separate container, a separate, than the more feminized men that need to come down into the power?
Yeah, that would be a separate kind of one-on-one coaching situation. I'm also running a course with Zach Rody called Dominant. And that's not so much for the masculine guys, but it could be. It's more for the emasculated guys. And it really is basically telling them or teaching them how to become more dominant in relationship with their women, so that she's really polarized by his power in the best sense. When I say polarized, I mean that always in the good way, unless I say otherwise. So she wants to feel his dominance in the relationship, because there's really no point in being dominant out there in the world with your purpose and then coming home and being emasculated with your woman.
Mhm.
That's ridiculous. It makes no sense. And the only reason that happens is because of the way that men and women have been falsely indoctrinated.
Mhm. So I feel like one of the reasons why I left Sweden was that I could feel that there was an identity crisis for men. And I feel like that's a little bit like even what you specialize on, because I felt as women in Sweden become more and more powerful, and it looks like that is a good thing, but I lived it on my skin, in my body, and I couldn't wait to get out of it. And still, my challenge today is that I fall back into it. When I just want to dance,
Yeah.
I start a company and I start thinking that at least I should make money with it. Like it always is there with me, and I always have to watch it, right? So
Yeah.
what I was feeling in Sweden, and when I come back, when I speak to my friends in Sweden, still like I see, I think I want to, what I'm doing right now is that I'm going into some of the challenges on the way, because I've seen what I see is very dysfunctional in Sweden specifically is that identity crisis. Because what's a man's role if a woman can do everything that he can do? He's not
Exactly.
needed, right? And then there's the
Yeah.
other thing, what I feel, I mean, it's probably the whole world, but like porn, for example, and the addiction that happens when you feel powerless, in the world and with your woman. And then what happens every night or 7 times a day when you have to try to distract away that pain of being powerless, and how porn has kind of taken, not like, not, it's not, there are those distractions that are just keeping us, or keeping, yeah, keeping us chasing that tail, and then the tail starts to chase us, and then we are in that pattern. So I would love you to speak a little bit about that, about what are some of the challenges that also needs to kind of be, weeded out on the way there, some of those, or
Yeah.
some of those dynamics that you have encountered, and that you might have, a way to work with, a way to start to
Yeah.
weed out.
Well, porn, I view porn as for slaves, that only slaves would sit there and stare at a screen and jack off to images. It's like chimpanzees in a cage. I'm very against porn. Now, I watched porn for a long time, decades, and I quit and I never went back. And the reason is that I just knew that it was emasculating me. I just knew it. Because what it is you're taking the life force and you're just dissipating it. You're just dissipating it. And no man is sitting in front of a screen whacking off. That's not what men do. That's what slaves do. And so, you're habituating your neurology in a way that is disastrous. Because really, and I've gone from being very liberal on all this stuff to being actually kind of conservative. I don't even mean to be conservative. It's just where I ended up being. I'm pretty radically conservative, though. It's like, you should save all of that for your woman. And when you save all that for your woman, you fuck her really well. You fuck her erotically very well, and you fuck her energetically very well. And that's your gift. But if you're spending 7 days a week whacking off to images on a screen, you're dissipating your gift to your woman.
Mhm.
And you shouldn't do that. Your sex is your gift to her, one of them. Your ability to penetrate her erotically and energetically is your gift. Don't fucking squander it whacking off to images. It's ridiculous. So I'm firmly against it. It's slavery is the way I would frame it. And then I would like to visit this great point that you made about, like, if women can do everything and they're so empowered, what do they need men for? And that's really fascinating, because no one could fuck a woman like a dominant man, energetically and erotically. So they cannot penetrate themselves the way that a dominant man can, energetically or erotically. They can't do it. So if they say, I'm going to do everything that a man could do, I'm totally self-subsistent, and she really masculinizes her and really has all this power, she's not going to have great orgasms, most likely, because she can't surrender or submit to his power in the bedroom. She's not going to have great relationships because she can't attract a dominant man. And he's the one that leads a great relationship. She can only attract emasculated men. Dominant men who are very masculine are not attracted to masculine women. No matter how much these women want to fantasize that they'll get a man who's more masculine than them, they are fucking themselves in a good way. I mean, in a bad way, in a bad way. They're fucking themselves in a bad way, right? Because they're in that masculine as a compensation, and they're doing it as a defense, not only as a compensation, not only as a defense. They could really enjoy doing whatever they're doing. But what he's looking for, the dominant masculine man, is looking for a woman who receives his penetration energetically and erotically. He does not want to fuck a brick wall. Okay. So if she is all in her power and her masculine energy and shows up in the bedroom like that, he can't penetrate that. And why would he even try? He's got other radiant women who will receive his penetration energetically and erotically. So they're deluding themselves. It would be like me saying, you know what? I am so feminine. I'm so in touch with my feelings and my heart and my vulnerability. But when a really feminine woman comes over here and I see her, I'm going to become masculine all of a sudden. No, we don't believe that bullshit. You're going to stay feminine because that's what you do. And you're going to have a depolarized situation with that feminine woman. There's going to be no masculine on the scene. So women who practice being in that defensive masculine shell because of their wounds, for example, they're not all of a sudden going to just drop all that, because that's how they're living their lives. That's what they're creating as their character, their self-identity. Okay, a woman actually has to learn just simply to be vulnerable and radiant and heart-centric just to do it, because it feels amazing. And then she's going to attract a dominant man who wants to be all over that, because that woman is the woman that receives his penetration, energetic and erotic.
Mm-hmm. And how do you, because you said that you were watching porn for decades, and I mean, this is not a conversation about porn, but it's still interesting to me if we look at in the world, like that industry and how much money is there as opposed, to many other industries. And I do feel like when I sometimes feel like I want to shake somebody so they kind of just die and fall down so they can rise again. And and those are some of the conversations where I felt like I can feel energetically the resistance. And I know that there's this biting of the tail, and the tail even starts to chase you. So I'm wondering, because you said you were consuming for decades and then now you have shifted. So what would be some, if you would give a few, like a little bit of advice for some of those knots or challenges that you're going to find on your way, like how to affront them, how to face them, how to go beyond them. Is there anything that that you could share about it?
With respect to pornography in particular?
I mean, let's start there, but then I would like to be general, like, if somebody watches this, what are a few things that, and since that seemed to be, at least in Sweden, a big thing where I feel like, it's an obstacle where it's, if we can't even clear that out, or if you're not even, okay, if you're not even willing to evolve beyond that, or to say, okay, what did I learn from this? Like, why did I have to be here? If you're not even willing to do that, what I feel is that, like you say, there's so much siphoning of life force that it's not much to build with something else. So I feel like that is, like we say, slavery has to go out first, even like thinking of spiral dynamics, before you can build anything on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would say to men is, you need to quit porn and view it as a challenge. Okay. And the reason that I suggest viewing it as a challenge is that when a man rises to the occasion and overcomes a challenge, he feels his power. Okay. And many men are divided. Part of them knows that they shouldn't be watching porn all the time. Okay. And then Part of them just succumbs to the temptations that battle. So what I say to him is side with the part that says no more. Side with that and view it as a challenge. Can you go one day without watching porn? Can you do it? If you can't even do that, then you need to understand that that's the shape you're in. You can't even set a challenge and meet that challenge and overcome this issue, this division in yourself. So if you can do it for one day, you're going to feel good. And you're going to realize that that feeling of goodness is actually better than the orgasm that you had. Because, you know, you've been having that orgasm every day for years or decades, and it's just like coffee in the morning. Whatever, it's great, you need it, but do you? You know? And so feel it. You're like, God, you know, I just overcame myself. No pun intended. I overcame myself. I met the challenge, and now I feel more like a man. When you set yourself a challenge and you meet that challenge, you feel more like a man. So start with the porn. Don't watch it for a day. And if you can do it for one day, do it for 2 days. Double it. You're now at 2 days. Ooh, this feels good. So you're replacing the feeling of being a man with the orgasm of a slave. Is that's what that orgasm is? It's the orgasm of a slave. Oh, I did it for 2 days. I'm going to double it for 4 days. If you can do it for 4 days, you're going to start feeling more and more like a man. Why? Because you set a goal and you achieved it, you overcame yourself, and you met the challenge, but also you'll notice that you just feel more powerful. Why do you feel more powerful? Not just because you've met your goals and overcome yourself, but because you are now consolidating your life force. You're not dissipating it by ejaculating to images on a screen. So then you go to 8 days. And then look at the broader picture. Wow, you feel great now. You met your challenge. You're feeling more like a man. You consolidated your power. What if you take on a new responsibility that you've been procrastinating on, or that you believe you couldn't do because you just didn't have the power or the self-belief or the courage? Take that on. And then you'll see that you can never really go back. You can't go back to whacking off the images on a screen because you're feeling so much more masculine, so much more powerful. And now you see why you were emasculated all those years, because you were, you know, whacking off the images in a screen and emasculating yourself. And now you are amassing your power. You're consolidating your power, and you can do more and more and more and feel better and better and better.
Mhm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So let's move on to some of the other things. I mean, this seems like a good practice to even start building the self, you know, like you say, to 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 be able to live up to challenge. That is building the self. So
That's right.
yeah. So what would be some other things that can, you know, that you can start doing a day that, you know, that feels like you're already starting, not that there's this insurmountable thing to become, you know. What are some of the other things that you would?
Well, I would highly recommend that men learn to meditate, because the most important thing you can do, there are two most important things you can do in this life, is realize your identity with source and awaken, and then become a master of perspectives. And I'm talking to the men here, because it's one thing to be awake as source, and then it's another thing to become a master of perspectives. Those are two different things. But once you become a master of perspectives, then you will become a master in your life, generally speaking. So waking up to your identity as source is like waking up to the causal, or waking up to Satchitananda, being consciousness bliss, right? And you can go further. You can go into what's called non-duality, which is what I practice. And you're not only awake to source, you are source. And then that realization descends through involution to all aspects of the body mind. Now, if you wake up to your identity as source, It doesn't mean that you've still got the best mental programs running. You could still have a lot of really shitty mental programs running in your mind. So that's where you have to do the work of the subtle, the high subtle, the cognitive. Get that in mind. So that begins with meditation. You learn to become a master of how your mind is, well, become a master of your mind in general. You learn how to let it go, let it dissolve, focus it, keep it concentrated, see where it's causing a bunch of problems for you and others.
Mm-hmm. So for a woman, would you say it's the other way around? It starts with the form and not the consciousness, or because you were making that clear that this is for men. Would you just give us a little bit of perspective so that we can see both parts?
Well, I would say for women, they should go to what feels the most incredible for them, which is here in the heart, and wake that up as much as possible so that the Kundalini life force is through this. And that's going to take them into the Sat Chitananda as well, as that becomes more dominant through their consciousness or more prevalent. So, for example, during dancing is an amazing way to experience that you can get so much into the ecstasy of the dance that your heart is completely open and you're glowing and you're radiant and everybody is looking at you on the dance floor. And it's because the divine is emanating and radiating throughout your whole body mind, but it's here, the heart chakra, where that is, primarily happening. For the men, the heart chakra is, of course, very important as well because it's what guides everything. But it's not, ideally, it's not overflowing and emanating and radiating in the way that the feminine is, right? Because what the feminine does with that heart radiance is she nurtures and nourishes every being around her. And she brings them home. You can feel at home in the presence of a very, very feminine woman. You just feel awesome because she feels awesome, right? So that's what I would say. Now, of course, she can do other things as well, but that's what I would recommend as the priority, right?
Mm-hmm. And one more question. It's about trauma, and because it feels like that's more kind of a somatic part of it and it's more in the body, and it feels like the ways that you're speaking, it's a lot like with consciousness and awareness and start to see the knots. But what about the knots that are more in the nervous system, that are more like a freeze or like flight, and all these things that are kind of cellular memories that are reproducing themselves, that are like more in the denser part, in the cellular memories? How do you address that, and is it different for men and women in the way you see it?
That's a great question. So I don't, I'm not someone who specializes in trauma, but I am someone who went through tremendous trauma from 19 to 27, where I had an 8-year dark night of the soul that preceded my awakening. And I had no idea what was happening. I didn't call it the dark night of the soul. But when I awakened and found source and realized my identity with it, I had a perspective on trauma, right? Now, you could say trauma has different forms. There's trauma from a woman being raped, let's say, or molestation. There's trauma from being held at gunpoint and almost dying. So let's just say there are a lot of different causes of trauma, obviously. The problem is, as you articulated, that it's stuck in the body at a molecular level, really. So, one course of action, of course, is to, take the therapy, the psychotherapy that deals with the trauma. That would, in my opinion, be incomplete, because what a person truly needs is to realize their identity with source. And every human being can do that who is not significantly impaired. Every human being can realize that identity, because where are you truly going to feel at home? So if we work on someone with trauma who's got it in their molecules and we don't show them home, where are they going to go? Where do you go? Do you just go from one trauma to the next trauma, or do you go to a place that is without trauma but is not awakened? You can try that. You can certainly try that, but you're still not bringing them home. So if I were to work with somebody, and I actually do have a client who has a lot of trauma, it's very difficult to work with her because she is invested in that trauma.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to show her how to get out of it, but she's very attached to it. And so what I would say is that people need to understand that they have to want it to get out of the trauma. And then I personally would start to show them home. Home is their realization of source as their identity itself. And then I do work with clients that have different degrees of trauma. And the ones that have a workable degree of trauma, I just say, you need to, for men, you need to wake up into your leadership and your power and your mission and your truth. And then any of the trauma that still exists, you work on it from that place of truth realization, of mission realization, of purpose realization. Like you're the lighthouse now. Now that you're the lighthouse, you can work on these wounds in your psyche from that place. If the trauma is too intense, then it's a different kind of work that I have to do, because those men aren't even going to really be able to recognize their purpose or their truth or their mission because they're too traumatized. So I would just say, you've got to find that truth first. So it is the purpose, the mission, the truth that heals the man of trauma. And it's the radiant heart that heals the woman of trauma. Okay. And one of the great dangers today in contemporary spirituality is that people make a religion out of their trauma. They make spirituality out of abuse and wounding. And they think that because they're so authentic with their wounds and their feelings, that this is the great reality. It's not. It's not. They're just lost. I call it trauma spirituality. I had to make up a word for it. And I'm like, no, your reason that you feel like that's the creme de creme is that you haven't awakened to source yet. So you're just dealing with your most intense feelings and calling that spirituality. No, you're just still lost.
I have one more question that's related because I hear you speak about mind body, and I hear you speak like the same I said, the molecular level, like the cellular level of imprinting. I'm wondering, how do you see the body, the physical body? Like, what is it for you? Can you speak about the body and its importance or non-importance?
Oh, that's a great question. So we talked about involution. And what I say is, the whole body needs to be divinized. So there's the divinization of the body. So there's nothing that's not sacred. Okay. However, I would say that even though everything's sacred, it doesn't mean that every experience is equally beneficial or equally healthy, right? So I teach polarity, dominance, and radiance for men and women. That would be what I would say the healthiest expression of the divinized body. And that sounds a little bit abstract, but you know, I don't view any aspect of the physical body as a problem. Or what happens when we evolve, consciousness needs to disidentify with its identification with everything and anything to find that formless realm, the formless realm. But then it needs to realize I am that. And when it realizes I am that, and it can stay in that realization no matter what it's doing. And that is post enlightenment. So if you're on a meditation cushion, for example, and you wake up to your identity as spirit, you can still move your finger and you're still awake. You can move your hand and you're still awake as spirit. You can get up and piss and you're still awake as spirit. You can do everything and anything in that realization. It's a post-enlightenment realization. So people will be like, you have to practice to get there unless you have an instantaneous awakening experience. So, that's part of the tantric perspective, which is there's nothing that isn't spirit, and everything can be in that wider picture of spirit, no matter what we're doing. However, there is still some shit that is not right, no matter what you do. It's never, no matter how awake you are, it's not going to be right to rape. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's part of the non-dual realization that even though everything is spirit, some things are still wrong. You can't rationalize it because that moral impulse in human beings is still spirit. And that moral impulse says, this is right, this is wrong. Sacrificing a child to Satan is not right. It's wrong. It doesn't matter how non-dual or dual you are. It's just wrong. And I really practice that as a post-enlightenment kind of perspective. I'm very clear on what's right and wrong, good and bad, and good and evil. Not to say that everything is that black and white, but I'm very clear when it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know. Did that answer your question, Bella, or did I leave anything out?
Yeah, no, I do see what you're saying, and I feel like, I mean, I came even more somehow from the other part. Like, I mean, sometimes I say that the physical body is the portal to everything, because as we're numb, like as a man is numb to his penetrating power, and as a woman is numb to her heart, like there's nothing. There's nothing. You can speak about evolution, involution, integral theory, tantra. You can speak about anything, but if you're numb to it in your own embodiment, there's nowhere from there. So somehow the denses, when it starts to come through in the denses, you have access to all the more subtle. So I would even go, I could even go so far as to say that the body is really the portal where we start from, because that's also, where we can be completely turned off. And then it doesn't matter. And that's the whole thing with the, kind of a little bit like similar to the spirituality you were speaking about, but that's when you're not even here, you're somewhere up there in a cloud. And that for me is very, very sad.
Yeah, I agree. You put it very well. And there is something, since we're both familiar with Ken Wilber, he wrote this essay it's called Toward a Comprehensive Theory of Subtle Energies. And he essentially said that every chakra has gross, subtle, and causal. So there's always a portal from the physical to the causal, or to Satchitananda, in every chakra, right? And this is one of the great issues of our time, at least in contemporary spirituality, that people have a lot of great theories that are disembodied, and they're not here in their flesh suit. So for me, there is no separation between the divine and the physical, that the physical is divine. However, for many people to realize the divine, they often have to dissociate from the physical to even get to that realization of the divine. That's a typically masculine, hyper-masculine thing to do. It's not the only way to do it,
Yeah, I like that you're saying that. And maybe that's, again, it's one is the gift of radiance, and one is the more the power and the truth and the awareness. So of course, to be the container and to be the form, that might be a perspective that that you learn embodied in this kind of body as I have. And I feel like that is to come to each other with a truth that is an absolute, but there is from a perspective, and to hear each other and to see both. That's in a way, it's that's what can lead to non-duality, because there isn't a preference of saying it's better to do it through the body and then kind of the spiral down up, or a preference when you have a preference to do it either from the outer to the inner, or the inner to the outer, then you are in that kind of duality of that. Yeah. So
Wonderful.
is there anything that you want to add that you feel like we haven't touched on?
I would just like to add that there is a systemic problem with the feminization of men and the masculinization of women. And it's very much in the Western world. What's happened is that it's messed up our ability to have devoted relationships. And it's not an accident. There is an agenda to split men and women, to split the nuclear family, and to cause a lot of strife and disharmony so that people are more easily controlled. There's so much manufactured chaos top down. And a major aspect of that is emasculating men and masculinizing women. So what happens is when a man is divided in himself, he can't even lead himself, much less his woman or his family. And he can't stand up to tyranny, can't stand up to the deception that is enslaving him and jeopardizing everyone that he loves. So what happens is that dominant masculine men are systemically eradicated as through education, through media, through employment, through chemicals, all this sort of engineering that's happening. It's not an accident. It's like, if you were to raise a crop of animals, you don't want them to be too troublesome where you won't be able to, eat them. So this process of emasculating men and masculinizing women is not accidental. It makes us easier to govern because we're going at each other's throats. And this is manufactured, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it right now, but it's when people are turned against each other rather than learning how to coexist harmoniously. And therefore, when they exist harmoniously, they start to see the power structure that is keeping them in chains. So instead, they're at each other's throats so they can't see who's ruling them. This is very real. And I'm not just some raving lunatic. This is actually very, very real. And we've just seen it now in the last year. What happens when you have a population on a planet with no dominant masculine men? Because dominant masculine men will say, don't even fuck with the people that I love. Don't even fuck with them through your deception, through your propaganda, through your lies, through your fakery. I don't know how political I can get on your live stream, and out of respect to you, I won't.
No, I love it. Be you and be true.
Okay, so in the United States, and well, I'll just say in the United States, we have a fake pandemic, we had a fake election, we have fake news, and we have a fake president. Okay? All in the last year and a half, although that goes very far back. So every dominant masculine man should be absolutely outraged. And before Facebook changed its policies, I was burning masks on Facebook for 30 days straight. This was back in September of last year. When men are in their dominant masculine, they protect and serve everyone that they love, and also their community and even the world. So you got to get rid of them. They're trouble. They're trouble for the power structure, for the powers that be. And so this last year, we've seen what's happened as a result of a systemic emasculation that's been happening for decades. And I'll share this one example to make it really come home for your audience. In Russia, I believe they took black wolves, something like that, from the wild. And over a course of 9 generations, they kept choosing the black wolves that were the least wild, more kinder, more submissive, less feral, less wild. And they kept on breeding those. And after 9 generations, they got a tame dog. So that's what happens over the generations. We get more and more emasculated as men. And then what's happened since the 60s is women have become more and more masculinized. So masculinity goes down for men, masculinization goes up for women. And we're seeing the results of that right now.
Yeah.
right, my friend, do you have anything that you'd like to close with?
I want to say thank you. I want to say I love this conversation, and I love that we're sharing from a place of experience and truth. And I'm intrigued that you're walking a fine line between something that's almost outside the body, but when you're a little bit pushed, you bring it all back in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of framing it. Yeah. That our infinite consciousness, our identity as source, is simultaneously outside the body, but is the body. So we're not limited to the body, but the body is still 1000% divine, right? So when I'm in deep samadhi, my physical body is like, I'm not even aware of it because I'm in that total bliss. But when I open my eyes and get off the meditation cushion and do everything else, I'm fully back in my body, but I'm still awake. Mm-hmm. And there's no duality between the body and that infinite sentience. And in fact, it's really important to just constantly be in that infinite sentience throughout your day. And the more awakened you are, the more you can do that, so that the activity of the body doesn't drag you out, so to speak, of that infinite sentience that is your birthright. It is your original nature, your original face, as they say. It's your home.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we end, where people that were touched by this conversation, where's the best way to find you?
Thank you. That's so sweet to ask. So I have a Facebook profile where I post this kind of stuff daily. And there are links under the posts that direct people. That's the quickest way to say it. So I'm connected with Zach Rohde, and we're teaching a dominance course for men. And that's part of the Dominant Academy that we've started. It's all under the Relationship of Your Dreams platform. I also teach a Truth Cock course, which is a membership subscription. We're in their 7th month now. And every Monday I do live streams, which I'll be doing after this call, if I have any voice left. And I publish a book a month that has this kind of material in it. And then I take selections from that book and put them in the group. There's also, we have this free forum where there's about 3,200 people, and me and Zach and another teacher named David just put free content, but other people post. And I think, and then I do one-on-one work with men and women. So that's can all be found under Mark Binet at Facebook.
Mm-hmm. And I'll add the link as well. But I love to hear, there's something when you speak it that actually is much more interesting than just some links. So we'll add the links as well under the conversation.
That's great. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you.
Bella, it was a real pleasure talking to you and meeting you, my friend. You're doing great work, and I just love your cosmic embodiment. You're very radiant.
Thank you.